Coming up next on this special Arizona's Future edition of Arizona Horizon, we'll hear about the latest genomics research from TGen. We'll see how former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor is helping increase voter turnout. And we'll talk about crowdfunding and how it can help startups and entrepreneurs achieve their goals. Those stories next on this special edition of Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to this special Arizona's Future edition of Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. First, a look at how cutting-edge genomics research is being conducted on a daily basis in downtown Phoenix at the Translational Genomics Research Institute, or TGen. We spoke with Dr. Michael Behrens, TGen's Deputy Director for Research Resources. Good to have you here. There's so much to get to, but let's start with a definition. What is the human genome?
Well, we all have one. We're humans. It's really our code of instructions of how we move from being a single cell at conception to becoming a complicated, self-renewing human being. It's our genetic instruction. We believe it's the medical textbook of the future as we've learned how to read it in the last 10 years or so.
Is it pretty much like digitizing, whatever the word is, the human body? I mean, it sounds like that's what it involves.
Well, it's the code behind what we see in the human body. So a digital code is, for the computer people in the audience, they're a 0 and a 1.
Yeah.
The genetic code has, instead of just 2 components, 0 and 1, it has 4. There's 4 building blocks that make up the genetic code. And it's very similar to that. It's very easy to read now that we've sequenced it, and it's exciting. It gives us a way to look at human disease.
Yeah, those 4 things. High school biology is starting to rear its ugly head. Okay, the impact of genomics research on neurological disorders, neurological diseases. What's happening downtown?
Wow, it's an exciting time. I think one of the most exciting things that we've seen in the last maybe 2 to 3 years that's come forth out of TGen has been a strategy to better understand people who let us look at their genetic code in the context of how their memory works. So TGen has a website that's called mindcrowd.org, and we've had over 30,000 people come onto that website, and they take a memory test, very simple, and then we can follow up and ask them for a cheek swab where we can get DNA, and we can start to look for events that would correlate with memory behavior. And there have been some amazingly exciting things. We're very interested in a healthy aging brain as well as a brain that doesn't age well. We all know people with dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and so looking at the extremes, we gain great insight into the genetic basis of those disorders.
And I would also imagine that things like autism, bipolar, involves kids as well.
It does. Understanding how the brain develops has a lot to do with how it functions. I'm very proud, and I think the whole Arizona community should be proud of TGen's Center for Rare Childhood Disorders. These are families with children that have been on medical legacies looking for some diagnosis, and now TGen's able to sequence the genetics of the kids and the family and start to identify events that could account for those problems. Many, many times diseases that we don't even have a name for because of their rarity, and we can find guidance on how to better care for those little ones. So that is a huge blessing for the state.
Also, I understand looking for biomarkers as far as concussion-related injuries are concerned to athletes and those who wind up with head-related injuries.
Well, athletes, but just humans on the planet that get bumped, fall off a bicycle, or in some kind of altercation. We're very interested to know how severe was the event. Right now it's very descriptive, and the neurologist and the ER staff have to work with kind of soft metrics, but we're now looking for biomarkers that might even be a saliva test to determine how severe a head injury, should an athlete not re-enter a game, take some time off. So we think we're going to have healthier people as we understand these markers for the bumps.
So in coming years, athlete gets injured, goes to the sidelines, do a little swab activity, and you might be able to, in the coming years, try to figure out whether that athlete should be back on the field or not.
Correct. We want to keep athletes healthy and strong, and if there's been a severe event, you would want to know and let them get back into the game when they're fully recovered from those.
The pathogen genomic studies in Flagstaff, what is that all about? And again, that sounds like it's everything from valley fever to HIV to plague. All points in between.
Well, it's a phenomenal, focused, but very diverse team that work with us as part of TGen's program at TGen North, our pathogen genomics division. We work with the Flagstaff community and with Northern Arizona University on these pathogens. Actually, in our body, Ted, there are more microbes than there are cells that are me. It's a little bit of a bizarre thought, but there are lots of microorganisms. Some of them are critical for the health of my body. We tend to think, it's a bug, it's bad, don't let it in. But having healthy microorganisms or a healthy microbiome can have huge influences on gastrointestinal health. And we want to learn better about how these things work. So that's a fantastic resource that leverages the genomic strength of TGen.
That's that whole probiotics kind of thing there, right?
Correct. Well, that's the strategy, that if you have a healthy gut, you're going to have a much healthier body. Yeah.
And again, as far as the genomic impact of that, and things like kidney disease and diabetes, the genomic impact specifically on those, what are you seeing out there?
Well, we're better understanding subgroupings of a disease. So diabetes affects 26 million people in the United States. That's massive. If we could understand subgroupings and patients who respond to behavioral modification or behavioral input versus those that need real restricted kind of dietary regimens, those would be very helpful and give us more success in helping people get through that lifestyle kind of disease that can represent.
Kind of understanding why some people who are diagnosed with diabetes, they go on a diet, everything kind of gets back to normal, or at least is treated, and some folks, you just can't seem to treat them.
That's correct. It's a whole range of who's most vulnerable, and
Yes.
then there's grades of that. And so we want to better understand how we can better bring the right medicine to the right patient based on genomics.
Let's talk about cancer research. How is TGen approaching cancer research? Is it with an elephant gun? Is it a tent the whole, or are you starting to narrow things down there?
I really hope that when people look at what TGen's doing in 2014 and we look in the rearview mirror down the road, we'll go, wow, they got out their lasers and we took a very fine look at what makes a tumor vulnerable to the therapies we have today, and how do you get the right chemotherapy or the right targeted therapeutic to the specific individual patients so that you are most likely to hurt the tumor without hurting the patient. And that's a fantastically exciting opportunity.
Does that opportunity change when you deal with kids as opposed to the folks in middle age, as opposed to folks in later age?
It actually does. The genetic noise in a cancer in an older person is large. There are an enormous number of genetic events in cancers from older people. We've been around a longer time, we've been exposed to more environmental agents, cosmic rays, various things. And so those genomes of those cancers are very complicated. It's tough to say who's the driver event and what do we design the therapy around. Tumors in children tend to be what we call quiet. There's very little noise. It's hard to decide, well, how is that even a cancer? And so it's an amazing contrast between pediatric cancers and adult cancers. But every time we study the whole genome of a cancer, we learn about the disease and we learn about things that can affect the next patient. So it's so important that these patients, who to me are the heroes, they help us understand the disease.
Well, that's interesting, because I think most people think that when you're born, you got your genomic makeup and your human genome is set in stone, that's it, it never changes. Are you saying it does change?
Well, it does. Our genome is affected by environmental agents, by our diet, not necessarily the sequence of the genome, that those are cause mutations, but they modify how the genes can get informed or unpacked to be used by cells. In the case of cancers, there are frank mutations and rearrangements and restructuring that take place, just terribly damaging events in a very complicated system. And those changes point us in directions on how to treat the disease.
So this is fascinating stuff. So when you consider the future, our series is looking at the future of a variety of things. When you look at the future of medicine, what do you see?
Well, I hope that my kids have physicians that are trained in the practice of precision medicine, that they understand that you get a histological or the tissue diagnosis of the disease, but also a genomic fingerprint of the disease. Did it come from my mom and dad? And so we have certain insights, but also if there's changes in the disease tissue, what can be done specifically to match a therapy to that event. And so I'm excited. Our Arizona medical schools are training the physicians of tomorrow who are going to be groomed for this kind of practice.
Well, it indeed is exciting. Great information. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Wonderful to be here. Thanks.
Justice Sandra Day O'Connor has served the country her entire life, but as producer Shauna Fisher reports, Justice O'Connor is now calling on others to do their civic duty.
Arizona's a great state. I love it. I grew up in a remote area on the east side of the state and on a ranch that was very remote. On election day there, we had to drive over 30 miles to get to the nearest polling place where we could vote.
It's an experience that Justice Sandra Day O'Connor has never forgotten, and one that would carry her to the highest court in the land as the first female U.S. Supreme Court Justice. In 2009, 3 years after retiring from the court, the Justice started O'Connor House. Sarah Suggs is its CEO.
O'Connor House is a nonprofit organization that was founded by Justice Sandra Day O'Connor to help solve important social, economic, and political problems through civil dialogue and civic action.
Under the watchful eye of the Justice, O'Connor House tackles 4 key issues, among them civic responsibility.
We talk about the term civic engagement, and I think what we're meaning when we talk about that is the notion that every one of us as citizens in our community needs to feel they're a part of it, and that they will vote when there are things to vote on, and that they'll discuss things with fellow citizens where citizens' opinions matter.
And where those opinions matter the most, Suggs says, is in the voting booth. In 2012, after learning about the dismal voter turnout in Arizona, O'Connor House launched the Great Voter Challenge.
We ranked 45th in the nation, which is really a very disappointing number, particularly that it was a presidential election year, which normally has a higher turnout than average. So in discussing this with Justice O'Connor, we realized that this is just simply not acceptable, and we have to do something about it. So the Great Voter Challenge was such that we, issued the challenge to all Arizonans, eligible citizens, to register to vote, become informed, and vote.
As we head into the election cycle this year, Suggs says the numbers are on the upswing. But she is quick to add there is more work to do when it comes to getting people to the polls.
Apathy and some frustration with citizens, disgust in some cases in its current state of affairs, and sometimes people just want to throw their hands up and they give up, and they can't, because only the votes of the people are going to change the course of action, change leadership if necessary at any given level, and make a difference. So not voting is really through an act of omission, letting the collective greater good down.
Justice O'Connor is hopeful for Arizona's future when it comes to civic responsibility. Strong words from a woman who made some of the biggest decisions for our country, but who believes the greatest decisions are made by the people.
It matters to me, and it should matter to all of us. We get to pick our leaders at the local level, the town council. We get to pick our county officials. We get to pick our state legislators and our governor, the state officials. And we're so lucky as citizens to get to do that. And so our job, I think, as adults is to encourage all our neighbors and friends to vote, to encourage everyone to vote when they have the opportunity, so that it's a collective decision we all make when we select our leaders.
For more information on the O'Connor House, visit o'connorhouse.org.
We want to hear from you. Submit your questions, comments, and concerns via email at arizonahorizon@asu.edu.
Crowdfunding is one way technology is changing how we connect with others. We'll hear from a crowdfunding expert in a moment, but first, we see how a single post to a website has changed one Phoenix family.
Melinda is 21 years old. She was born like a kind of little bit late start kids.
It took 7 years for Lynn Baldwin to learn her daughter had DeGeorge syndrome, a disorder caused by a chromosome defect. It took 14 more years for Lynn to discover her daughter's talent.
She first started was by accident.
It started when Lynn asked Melinda to paint for Grandma.
It was so pretty. She said, "Mom, I like to keep it for myself. I'll do another one for Grandma." And I thought, okay, great idea. So she started to do another one. Of course, the other one, she also liked it.
And another and another. In just 6 weeks, Melinda has created more than a dozen pieces. But they're not just covering the family's tables and walls. Melinda is now painting for people she's never met, strangers who've invested in her.
It's just beautiful.
When Melinda's mother realized the power of painting, she turned to a crowdsourcing site to gather donations for supplies.
I'm very thankful for their help. People just have a very good heart.
The goodness comes from across the U.S., Massachusetts, Illinois, and Arizona. Lynn hoped to collect $200. She got more than $300.
Paragon City.
Her mind just goes everywhere. I mean, I can't figure out what's in her head. So through her painting, I can understand actually a little bit about her.
I like blue and white.
Someday she has orange, red, and it's a very happy color. And then the other times she has blues, greens, more like a deep sea color. So it's a reflex in her mind.
When she paints, Melinda says she just goes with what she's thinking.
Always fast.
Always fast, always joyful. In exchange for their support, Melinda's backers get colorful thank you cards, canvas paintings, and a mother's eternal gratitude.
She's a lot happier after painting. It gave her meaning for her life.
Melinda's mother is now considering creating a permanent website where people can view and purchase Melinda's paintings. To learn more about crowdfunding, we spoke with Mary Juden, founder of Tracklight, a Phoenix company that's developed a software platform to identify and protect intellectual property. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is for me at least, it's a little bit confusing here. We got crowdsourcing, we got crowdfunding, you got equity crowdfunding, you got rewards-based crowdfunding. What did we just see with this family? What was that? Is that rewards-based?
Yes, Ted, that's rewards-based crowdfunding. The origin of crowdfunding, or going out to find your crowd and find a source of money, is donations. But this is one step further, because although people were donating the $300 that they collected, the donors, instead of just receiving, the good feeling that comes along with a donation, they're actually getting perks or rewards, which were the paintings or the thank you cards.
Okay, so that's that kind of rewards base. Now let's get to equity crowdfunding, which I think is very interesting as well, because this could be big news for startups, entrepreneurs. Define that for us.
So equity crowdfunding on the federal level came out of the JOBS Act, which is the Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act, which was signed into law in April of 2012. And the idea is that instead of having to be an accredited investor, which means you have to have certain net worth or level of income, anybody can invest and buy basically a piece of a company by going online and using a crowdfunding portal.
So if I've got Ted's Hamburgers and I'm looking for equity crowdfunding, you could donate $5 to Ted's Hamburgers, and now I have to keep track of your donation and you get returns on that. How does that work?
So actually, if you had Ted's Hamburgers and you would go to a funding portal, and the reason I'm saying you would go is because it's not yet legal in the US to do this equity crowdfunding, but I would go and I would say, hey, I want to be an investor in Ted's Hamburgers, and if I could buy one share for, let's say, $5, which would be a great deal, I could then purchase that $5 share, and you would have to keep track of everybody who invested. So it's not really a donation. You're actually investing, on the stock market.
You're just not, as it stands right now, quote unquote, accredited.
Correct. So it is for anyone. You have to have a certain amount of income. There's some rules about how much you can invest. Like, for example, 5% if you make under $100,000. So that would limit you to, say, $5,000 a year of investment. But it opens up a huge source of funding for small businesses and startups.
So, and before we go on now, you said this wasn't legal yet. I thought it passed in 2012. What's going on?
So it passed into law, and then the SEC the Securities Exchange Commission, was tasked with coming up with the rules for this. So they created rules that came out last October. They were a tad late, about 9 months late. It's a big job though. Yeah. And they came out with these rules. They opened it up for comment. Comments were received until early 2014, but the SEC hasn't released the rules that they may or may not have changed based on those comments. So although there are some states that have intrastate or within the state crowdfunding, there's no federal crowdfunding allowed right now in the U.S.
And I guess the idea, because I guess we look on both sides of the issue here, if I've got Ted's Hamburgers and I want to make sure that I'm doing the special thing I'm doing with Ted's Hamburgers, someone doesn't run off and open a chain or something, that's my intellectual property, that needs to be protected to some degree, correct?
Correct. Whether it's rewards-based crowdfunding, equity-based crowdfunding, or frankly just raising, if you were going to angel investors, raising crowdfunding, you might have your secret recipe for your hamburgers. So that's nothing that you're going to patent. That's nothing that, there's no protection for that. So you have to keep your secret sauce literally secret. So let's say you had something like your name, Ted's Hamburgers, you wanted to protect that. All these things have to be identified and protected before you go out publicly. So somebody doesn't steal your idea once it's out there.
Okay, let's go to the other side of the fence where I'm just as big as life with Ted's Hamburgers here, and you decide 5,000, 10,000, I'm just going to dump a whole bunch of money in there, and tomorrow Ted's Hamburgers says, thank you very much, I'm gone, I'm out of here with your money. How do you protect investors?
And that is a big concern, and the Jobs Act has a lot of information around education for investors. When a company goes out to raise money, currently that's not raising money on the stock exchange, they create a private placement memo which lists all kinds of risks. So part of what the SEC rules came out with is the same kind of disclosure or information has to be provided when I would be making my investment in Ted's Hamburgers. You would have made available to me as the investor a whole raft of information, including risks that you might go out of business. And investing in private companies is risky business.
It is, especially if the private company is a little on the shady side.
However, and there's been lots of people who've talked about it, and the difference between somebody who's on the shady side, you have to comply with background checks, you have to comply with a lot of regulations, you have to provide financial statements, you have to provide a lot of information. So there's a lot of rules around it to try to prevent any kind of fraud.
We don't have too much time left, but I keep hearing of Indiegogo and Kickstarter. What are those?
So Indiegogo and Kickstarter are the rewards-based platforms at this time. So there you can go and list your project or your film or whatever your cause or whatever you're doing. You list it there, and then you offer a series of rewards. So for example, when, if you're doing something around a movie, you might get your name in the credits or get a hat that has the movie logo on it or something like that. And that's how people gather money. There's no ownership there.
So in other words, if you give me $5,000 for my film about hamburgers, let's say,
yes,
and it winds up, and I give you a hat or I give you a burger patty or something, and it winds up making millions of dollars, you don't get any of that.
No, because our deal was I'm supporting you, I'm getting my hat, and you're gathering the money you need to make your project successful.
Is this the future? We're talking about Arizona's future in this entire series. Could this be the future of startups?
I think that both the rewards-based and the equity-based is the future of the way for startups to get started. there was a lot of pushback around the equity saying, people don't want to use this to raise $1 million. Most startups, if it's not a huge idea where you're going to need millions, you could get started with a very small amount of money. And if you go to the right crowd, which is your Arizona ecosystem, to raise that money, we can end up creating more jobs in Arizona. So it would be great. There's about 12 or 13 states now who have their own intra-state crowdfunding laws, and I would think it would be great if Arizona would do that.
Is it in the works, do you think?
I haven't heard that it's in the works,
okay.
but I'd love to hear that it is.
Well, here. Before you go now, you are with TrackLight. What is TrackLight?
So I founded TrackLight when I was in law school here at Arizona State in 2010 because I saw that entrepreneurs were losing their intellectual property, and intangibles or intellectual property are about 80 to 90% of the value of companies these days, particularly startups. And we created a software platform that allows entrepreneurs very affordably to identify the intellectual property that they need to protect. So that's what we created, and we're a proud Arizona company.
And I would say that you are rooting for crowdsourcing and crowdfunding to increase as well.
It would be great for us, but like we tell everyone, 100% of companies have IP. Even Ted's Hamburgers has IP.
All right.
So regardless of how you're raising your money, you still need to identify. The bank wants to know that you have your IP.
Yeah, I'll bet it does. Yeah. Well, very interesting. It does sound like it's fascinating. I mean, it makes you want to go just do something and get a bunch of people behind you.
Go log on to Indiegogo.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us on this special Arizona's Future edition of Arizona Horizon. You have a great evening.
If you have comments about Arizona Horizon, please contact us at one of the addresses on your screen. Your comments may be used on a future edition of Arizona Horizon. Thank you. Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.